You can see my screen, right?
Yes, we can see your screen. I'll just remind everyone else to keep their mics on mute until we begin the Q&A.
So thank you very much, Chalini, for that introduction. So like Chalini was saying, the Open Budget Survey is a comparative assessment of budget transparency across countries. So this is done by the International Budget Partnership, and Sri Lanka's country partner is Verite Research. We have been the research partner since 2015. So in this round of the survey, 117 countries were covered, and we'll be talking about Sri Lanka's results for this round of the survey. So if we quickly go into what the Open Budget Survey covers, the primary thing that we are looking at is budget transparency in terms of the disclosure in budget documents, which is measured by the Open Budget Index. Second, there are two smaller elements which are also covered, which is budget oversight by the legislature and by audit institutions, as well as the public participation mechanisms that are there for the budget process. The structure of this presentation is going to be under these three themes of transparency, oversight, and public participation. What we'll be looking at is how did Sri Lanka perform in these areas. We'll be looking at how our score has changed from the last cycle, which was done in 2015, and what the recommendations are going forward. So lastly, we'll look at the current context in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic and how these recommendations and these themes of transparency, oversight, and public participation still fit in and how they are relevant to the current context. So first we're going to go into the main aspect which is measured by the Open Budget Survey, which is transparency. So when we consider the budget, the information that's contained in this are things like what taxes are going to be levied, what kind of expenditure is going to be made for the public. So all these things are decisions that are going to affect the public. So the first point of including public participation in getting public engagement in the budget process is having adequate budget transparency and disclosing information about the budget to the public. So in the Open Budget Survey, we're looking at three main aspects. We're looking at the availability of certain key budget documents. We're looking at the timeliness of their publishing, and also we're looking at how comprehensive these are. So if we go into the score for this year, the Open Budget Index score for Sri Lanka has been given as a 47 out of 100. And that puts us out of the 117 countries that were measured, it puts us as 54th place. So if we look at how our score has moved over time, we have improved from last year's score, which was a 44, but we still don't meet the sufficient standard of information, which is a minimum score of 61. We are, however, above the global average score of 45. But as I mentioned, we are not meeting the minimum required standard of 61, which indicates sufficient budget disclosure. So if you look at the score over time, we can see that it has varied quite a bit. And one thing to keep in mind is that the changes in the score come from both what we do and what we don't do in terms of budget transparency, as well as how the methodology has evolved over the years and how international best practices in terms of budget transparency have also improved and become more stringent. So if we look at our rank over time, the dark blue line shows you how our rank has moved. When back in the early years of the survey, so the survey was commenced in 2006. In the year where we got the best score of 67, the best score in terms of our performance, we scored third. We were ranked 13 out of the 94 countries that were considered. But if we look at our rank now, it's a 54 out of the 117 countries that are considered. So what we can see clearly is that as budget transparency standards and practices improved, Sri Lanka has not kept up with these standards, and other countries have moved ahead of us in terms of the ranking. So these are the 8 key budget documents which are tracked by the Open Budget Survey in terms of transparency. How we have, so the primary improvements, if you look at the last column, that is what's showing the availability of budget documents in this cycle of the survey. How we have improved mainly is that in this year we published a citizens budget, which was not published in the previous cycle. And also we published the audit report in this year, which was something that was only published for internal use in the previous year. So where does this score of 30 or 47 put us? So there are, it makes us fall into this category of limited information disclosure, and there are 36 countries that fall into this category. But out of the 117 countries that were assessed, we can see that there are 31 countries that actually meet this minimum requirement that's of the score of 61 in terms of budget transparency. And looking at our regional performance, we are third out of the 6 countries in South Asia, which are tracked by the Open Budget Survey. One interesting point to note here is that none of the countries in our region meet the sufficient level of information that's shown by a score of 61. So Sri Lanka, as I showed you in the previous slide, we produced 6 of those 8 key budget documents that are required. And the best performing country in our region, Afghanistan, also produce 8 of the key budget documents that are required and make them publicly available. But none of the countries in our region meet this, including Sri Lanka, none of the countries meet this sufficient standard of a score of 61. So this has to do with the comprehensiveness of the documents that we publish. If you look at this table, what it shows is the key budget documents in this year that were assessed for the purposes of the survey and how they have individually been scored in terms of their content. So as you can see, the Appropriation Act, which is the enacted budget, scores quite well. And the annual report and budget estimates, though they don't meet this requirement of 61, they perform reasonably well. However, the citizens budget, the in-year report, and the audit report score poorly in terms of how comprehensive they are. So this is being measured against international standards of what should be in these documents. And the other point to note is the mid-year review, which in our case, what we publish is the mid-year fiscal position report, which is done by the Ministry of Finance. It hasn't been considered for this survey because it doesn't meet the minimum requirements in terms of what's expected of a mid-year review. So that's why it gets noted as not published. So in this context, our recommendations are that the comprehensiveness of the documents we produce should be better, and there should also be better consistency across documents. So specifically, we would like to highlight the mid-year report and the in-year data, which are 2 documents that have to do with the implementation of the budget. So the mid-year report at the 6-month period of the implementation of the budget, it would be looking at how the implementation has gone so far and how they expect the revised macroeconomic forecast for the rest of the year and how the budget implementation is intended to perform for the rest of the year. Your in-year data will look at it's something that's usually published quarterly or monthly, and what it's again tracking is how the implementation of the budget is going. So in terms of improving the comprehensiveness, for mid-year reports, what we require is that forward-looking projections of the fiscal estimates for the rest of the year, and the revised macroeconomic forecast should be included in the mid-year fiscal position report. And it should also cover the first 6 months of the year, because currently the mid-year fiscal position report that we produce covers the first 4 months of the year. In the in-year data, the way that we can improve our comprehensiveness is that we disclose individual actual revenues by individual source. So what this means is that it should, for example, show how much revenue was from income tax, how much revenue was from VAT. So in that way, it should give a more detailed picture of where the revenue is coming from. And also it should include a comparison of revenue and expenditure either to the original estimates or the figures in the same period for the previous year. So what this again does is it gives you an idea of how well the budget implementation is going, because you can track the implementation figures of this year against what was either estimated or what it was in the past. Lastly, the point that we want to bring out is that when this because what we have seen is that in certain instances, even so reports in the same year, for example, the annual report and the mid-year report may not be directly comparable for certain categories because of the way they disclose the information in different ways. So this really it creates a deficiency in terms of being able to perform an analysis or make meaningful use of that information. So in disclosing any information, the data reporting should always be in a consistent format. So next we move into the second part of the second section that's that's tracked by the Open Budget Survey, which is oversight. So here we are looking at oversight by both the Parliament and by the National Audit Office. So this is legislative oversight and audit oversight. So essentially what we're looking at is how the budget process is being monitored by, and that checks and balances system is working in terms of ensuring accountability. So in this regard, our composite score for the two aspects of legislative oversight and audit oversight is a 50 out of 100. This is below the required level of 61, and it's below the global average score of 54 as well. If we individually look at our performance in legislative oversight and in audit oversight, what we see is that audit oversight actually performs quite well. It has a score of 78 out of 100 in this year, which is considered adequate information. And if you also notice, it has improved from last year's score of 67. But when it comes to legislative oversight, we are not doing as well because our score is only a 36 out of 100, and it has dropped from last year's score of 42. So audit oversight mainly improved because in this cycle of the survey, there were independent reviews of the audit process, whereas legislative oversight fell due to there was less time available for the Parliament to examine the budget proposals, and certain reports by the Committee on Public Finance was not made publicly available. So because of factors like this, our score has dropped in this year, and we continue to provide less than adequate levels of legislative oversight. If we move into really quickly looking at what the function of legislative oversight is, or why this is important, we know that the executive, in the sense the Ministry of Finance and the line ministries, are the bodies who are responsible for both implementing the policy and also drafting the initial budget. So the legislature then provides a oversight or a monitoring mechanism by approving the budget and also monitoring its implementation. So this is how the system of checks and balances is maintained in this instance. And also there are specialized parliamentary committees like the Committee on Public Finance, the Committee on Public Enterprises, and the Committee on Public Accounts. So these committees have access to specialized knowledge that actually allow them to examine the public finance decisions of the public finance decisions and give a detailed understanding of published reports regarding their recommendations and the analysis of the budget process. So, and lastly, the point we have to bring in is that the legislature acts as the people's representative, or how the people are represented in this budget making process. So there are two ways in which the people can actually contribute to the budget process. One is directly through public participation mechanisms, which is what we'll cover in the next part of the presentation. But indirectly, how they're represented in Parliament is through their elected representatives. So in this regard, our recommendation is that there should be higher accountability for changes made to the approved budget. So what we mean by this is that the Parliament should be consulted before the Ministry of Finance or the executive shifts funds from what's specified in the enacted budget. So in cases of shifting funds between administrative units, which would mean between ministries or departments, or in the cases where there's spending of unanticipated revenue or reducing spending due to revenue shortfalls. International best practices stipulate that in these kind of cases, the legislature should be consulted before shifting, whereas in practice in Sri Lanka, what would happen is that they would it wouldn't happen before they shift the funds. So in terms of strengthening legislative oversight, as we mentioned before, this is the area in which we are weak, and it would affect the approval and the implementation stage of the budget. The main recommendation is that this accountability mechanism for changes made to the approved budget should be strengthened. And the reason that this recommendation specifically is our key recommendation for this section is that in the past, what we have seen is that there's significant deviation in terms of what is actually implemented versus what is initially there in the enacted budget. So what this table shows you is the percentage deviation of the actual expenditure in each of these sectors compared with what the original estimated expenditure for the year was. So for example, in 2015, what you can see is the energy and water supply sector was overspent by 161%. Similarly, in 2013, agriculture and irrigation was underspent by 40%. So as we can see, what actually happens in implementing the budget is quite different from what was originally estimated. Hence, the recommendation on adding some additional oversight to this shifting of funds or any changes to the budget by consulting Parliament beforehand. So the last section that we are moving into is on public participation. So this looks at how the public can provide their input to the Ministry of Finance or the Parliament or the audit institution in the budget process to directly provide their input or their to directly engage in the budget process. In this regard, our score is 17 out of 100, which indicates few opportunities for public participation in the budget process. But we have improved from our last year's score of 11, and we are also above the global average score of 14. So this is an area which globally countries are struggling to meet the best practices because, as you can see, the global average score is also quite low. So we have numerous mechanisms that are there in terms of providing budget, in terms of providing public input in the budget process. So we have things like the citizens engagement program, we have stakeholder meetings with chambers, things like, so there are certain mechanisms that exist, and from the last year these have been improved, and there are also additional mechanisms that have been introduced where even the line ministries now consult with the public on the grassroots level in formulating their budget proposals. So these are the main areas these are the areas in which we have improved and managed to increase our score from 11 to 17. And regionally, we rank second in the South Asian region, with just behind Nepal, which is scoring 22. But if we look at public participation by the budget stage in which they get to, in which they have these these mechanisms implemented, what we can see is that our score is quite weak when it comes to approval and implementation. Essentially, we don't have any public participation mechanisms for the public to give their input in implementing the budget, but there are a few mechanisms available in the budget approval stage. So in this again aggravates what we pointed out before, where we have weak legislative oversight, which again the legislature also gets involved in the budget approval and the budget implementation stage. So in addition to that, what we see is that even in public participation, it's budget approval and budget implementation that are most weak. So these two together really it worsens the situation in terms of budget, budget approval and budget implementation. So our recommendation in this area is that there should be greater and more inclusive public participation in budget implementation. So here there should be some kind of mechanisms that can be implemented for the public to engage in monitoring budget implementation. So, for example, in the other countries that were tracked by the Open Budget Survey in the 2019 cycle, we have noted that countries like, for example, Mexico, they have a mechanism implemented where when there are budget proposals that benefit certain disadvantaged communities, there are committees established within those communities itself to provide feedback on the implementation of those proposals. So in ways like that, there are mechanisms that can be introduced for the public to be able to contribute in budget implementation. And another point to make note of is that throughout any public participation mechanism that's introduced at any stage of the budget cycle, disadvantaged and vulnerable communities should be proactively included at every stage. So lastly, we go into the current context and how the recommendations and the themes of transparency, oversight, and public participation still are relevant in the current context, and how these recommendations are essential going forward as well. So what we see now is a situation where with the coronavirus pandemic in the country, there are massive amounts of funds being mobilized. So we know that the government spent 50 billion as relief funds in April. We have the donations to the President's COVID fund, I believe, coming somewhere close to 1.5 billion now. We have negotiations ongoing with international agencies to get loans for expenditure that's going to come up. So the current situation is one that requires these funds to be spent quite quickly and rapidly. And what happens is sometimes normal protocols are bypassed, and it can leave certain room for inefficient use of these funds and also for misuse. And if we think of what outcomes these funds are going towards, what it's going towards is, for example, the healthcare systems and the healthcare workers in terms of doctors, the nurses, the public health inspectors, also on measures to contain the spread of the virus on the quarantine centers. And we also know that there's the 5,000 rupees handout being given to vulnerable communities like the Samruddhi recipients and senior citizens. So we can argue right now that more than ever before, effective outcomes from the spending of these funds is critical, because these are the things, these are the aspects, or these are the areas that it's going towards. But what we have seen is that when it comes to implementing the promises of the government or the outcomes that are coming from the expenditure of these funds, the implementation doesn't always perform as expected. So what you see here is the results from budgetpromises.org, which is our platform which tracks the progress of proposals above 1 billion in the budget. So in 2017 and 2018 respectively, you can see that 16% and 26% of proposals were what were considered fulfilled, which means that it was completed or came close to completion, about over 80% of progress. So that's a very small amount considering the total amount of proposals. And it really shows the fact that when it comes to implementation, there are the level of the deficiencies are quite significant. So it's in this context that our recommendations before on transparency, oversight, and public participation are important in terms of creating accountability. When there is accountability, what happens is that there will be better outcomes in terms of actually achieving the outputs that you expect from the expenditure of funds or from the budget. And also what that does is, when there's accountability, there is more public trust in the budget and in the credibility of the budget specifically. But one additional point that we have to note is that for proper implementation, there should also be a well-formulated budget. This is the final recommendation that we bring in this area, where there should be well-formulated budget proposals and estimates. So what we mean here is that all revenue and expenditure proposals that go into the budget should be backed by detailed estimates. There should be a sensitivity and scenario analysis done. The feasibility of the project should be assessed. There should be an identification of risks and the risk mitigation strategies. So all of these will contribute to making sure that the budget proposals are well formulated, and therefore the implementation of them will also be better. Considering the context that we are moving into, where in 2020 there is negative growth, GDP growth that's forecasted, there's a very high level of our budget deficit is quite high. And we also have a downgraded credit rating, which means that it will be more difficult for us to borrow. It's in this context that the next government budget is going to be coming in. And the budget will act as a roadmap which shows how the government is going to cope with this recovery, or what measures are going to be introduced. So the budget will show what kind of expenditure is going to be done on healthcare expenses and containing the virus. It'll show how the funding is going to go to certain affected sectors like tourism and exports. It will show tax reliefs that are going towards SMEs and other affected businesses, and also welfare expenditure for individuals who have lost their income. So in this context, what we are saying is that the recommendations above will of transparency, oversight, and public participation are relevant to having an effective budget process and getting the outcomes that we require. Secondly, the point to note is that right now we need the support of international funding agencies. And we know that we are in negotiation or have finished negotiations with the World Bank, the IMF, and the ADB in terms of getting loans and grants to fund the future expenditure of the government. And when we get these kind of funds, even for these agencies, a transparent and an effective use of the funds is something that will be quite critical for in terms of the usage of the funds. So it's in this context that we bring in the 6 recommendations that we have covered throughout this presentation. Firstly, we looked at transparency, and we looked at the mid-year review in terms of that the mid-year review and the in-year reports both need to be more comprehensive. The mid-year review in having the projections of macro forecast and the fiscal estimates, and also covering the first 6 months of the year. The in-year reports need to report actual revenues by individual source, in the sense by, for example, income tax or VAT, and the comparison of your revenue and expenditure to the original estimates of the year or the levels in the previous year. And lastly, what we said in transparency is that data should be reported in a consistent format across all the budget documents, so that it allows for comparison and analysis across documents. Then in terms of legislative oversight, the recommendation that we highlighted is that Parliament should be consulted before the Ministry of Finance shifts funds between ministries or spends any unanticipated revenue or reduces spending due to the shortfalls in revenue. In public participation, what we pointed out was that in budget implementation, there are no mechanisms that exist right now for the public to provide their input. Therefore, bringing in these mechanisms and also proactively including vulnerable communities throughout the budget cycle is important in making sure that the budget is well formulated and well implemented. Lastly, the point that we brought in was that there should be well-formulated revenue and expenditure proposals and estimates that are backed by detailed calculations, sensitivity analysis, feasibility studies, and risk mitigation strategies. So these are the recommendations that we are bringing in terms of improving the budget process and improving all 3 aspects of transparency, oversight, and public participation. So this is the end of the presentation. Chalani, will you, it's back to you.
Sure. Thank you, Lahiri. Now I'd like to invite any questions that you all might have, and we can have a short discussion. Before we begin, I'd like to mention that we also have with us our research director, Deshal Dimel, who will also join the Q&A, and you are free to direct your questions to both Lahiri and Deshal. Does anyone have a question? I ask you to please unmute yourself and ask your question. If you like, you can also send in your question through the chat box if you prefer typing it, and someone can read it out and we can have your question answered.
Can questions be asked in any language?
Yes. I'll just read one question. Yes.
I have a question, Harani.
Yes.
So now this accountability, does it really matter for Sri Lankans? I'm sorry to ask this because I have been covering budgets for last 10 years or 15 years, but basically except for these investors and some select group, I don't see people really bothered about accountability how did they, what were the policies they present last year and whether they were implemented or not. I mean, how can as journalists, how can we make a difference among the public, to encourage them to kind of see what they have done or what they haven't done.
Shall I comment on that? Thank
Yes,
you,
Vishal.
Shiha. That's a great question. Yeah, thanks, Shiha. That's a great question. I think one of the problems that we've had in Sri Lanka is that we haven't always had a lot of visibility on what goes on after the budget. So we have a lot of attention towards what happens in the budget speech, what the proposals are. But beyond that, there is very limited, say, coverage or very limited visibility of what goes on in terms of the implementation process. And that is why actually Verita Research started the budget promises, which tracks the implementation of key budget proposals as well, and that provides in some way a structured mechanism of understanding what happened, what the fate of all these proposals is after the budget speech is made. So I think that's the first step in terms of garnering some public attention and public interest, is to give that visibility to drive public accountability also. So while Sri Lanka is still in a fairly nascent stage in terms of having this kind of interest, I think what we've seen in the last few years is that public interest is starting to be generated. And I think it's important that we continue this process of providing this visibility and tracking budget implementation processes as well, and that will, I think, help further drive public interest, and in turn create a positive cycle towards improving public accountability and the implementation process as well.
Thank you, Deshal. Do we have any other questions? I will just read out one of the questions from the chat. How is the proposed advanced personal income tax going to impact revenue estimates? Will there be leakages in the proposed system? That's just one question from the chat. Deshal, if you can just look at that as well.
Yeah, so the APIT it looks largely similar to the PAYE system that was in place until January this year. PAYE, basically, it's collection of tax at source. So it's a fairly relatively efficient way of collecting income tax, because the Inland Revenue Department basically has to deal with only the employers. So you're looking at a few 10,000 employers, as opposed to dealing with millions of employees to file the income tax. So that collection of withholding, it's a form of withholding tax, and that is a relatively efficient way of collecting. APIT is basically a similar kind of, it's again on the same concept in terms of the tax being withheld at source by the employer. But what I understand is that the APIT is going to be on a voluntary basis. So then that becomes a little bit less straightforward than the PAYE that was there before. So there is some room for leakage compared to the PAYE system. But it's certainly an improvement on what was there before, between January and April, which was where the individual has to declare the tax entirely on his own, and that leaves a lot more room for leakage than the proposed APIT.
Thanks, Deshal. Do we have any questions on our presentation itself, including the findings of the OBS as well as the recommendations that were presented?
Yeah, I have a question now. The mid-year review, isn't it similar to the mid-year fiscal report?
Yeah, so that's what we pointed out in the presentation. The current mid-year fiscal position of the Ministry of Finance doesn't include certain details that makes it qualify as a mid-year review in terms of the international standards, which is what OBS is assessing against. So that's why even though we have a mid-year fiscal position report, it hasn't been considered in the survey. And what we pointed out in our recommendations in terms of having those revised macro forecasts and revised fiscal estimates, and also having it for the first 6 months of the year is what's missing right now, or what needs to be included in the mid-year fiscal position report.
Thank you.
Udita, do you have a question on the presentation? And if you can just also give us a quick introduction of who you are, because unfortunately we can't see everybody, but so it would be nice to know who you are.
Sure. This is Udita. I work for the Daily FT newspaper. I have two questions. One is in terms of Sri Lanka being a marginal upper middle income country, where do we fare in terms of that category and in comparison to certain East Asian economies? I know in South Asia we're like the third, but I was just curious about how we manage in that sort of bracket. And secondly, my second question is directed to Mr. Dimel. Now, a lot of these transparency issues are connected to the finance ministry. You were in the finance ministry for several years under the previous administration, and there were all sorts of plans to increase transparency, increase open budget processes, to set up a parliamentary budget office, etc. What actually happened? Because frankly speaking, we didn't see an increase in transparency, especially in terms of engagement with the media. And what was the bottleneck that prevented these things from happening during the last 2 to 3 years? Thank you.
If I can quickly answer that first question. So in terms of performing well in budget transparency or improving in budget transparency, it's not something that's, for example, only limited to like high income countries, because even countries like, we have seen countries like Ukraine and all, in the open budget survey, we have seen that they are making quite big improvements and in terms of budget transparency. Specifically on your question of upper middle income status and how we compare to those kind of countries, I don't have the number right now on how we would rank against these countries, but I can get back to you on that.
Yeah, Udita, on the on your question. So look, I think Sri Lanka has a lot of systemic issues when it comes to overall governance with regard to issues of transparency, accountability, and so on. And these are not things that will change overnight. Again, I think it draws back to what Shiha's questioned earlier as well. There also has to be an increased public demand for this as well. And I think what we have seen is that in the past, when there is significant public demand for certain things, government does respond, albeit slowly. And even at the ministry, there was intentions to put more emphasis on the monitoring of implementation. Again, far from perfect. But what we do see is incremental change. But what we have to continue to see is this continued public demand for these kind of improvements, public demand for accountability, public demand for transparency. Media plays a big role in being the voice of the public in terms of driving this demand as well. And institutions like Verite will also try to play their part in terms of trying to bring in platforms like budget promises that will help bridge this gap in whatever way possible as well.
Thank you, Deshal. I have another question from the chat box. This is from Kamanthi from the Daily Mirror regarding one of our recommendations. The question is, how can vulnerable communities such as estate sector be included in terms of public participation? Can the mechanism in Mexico be implemented here? If so, do we have the cadre to conduct surveys among these communities? Was I heard, Deshal and Lahiri?
Shalini, I just entered and heard the question.
Yes.
I think Lahiri's presentation was in terms of implementation, right? So Lahiri, you can say more about Mexico, but I think the concern that is reflected in the OBS methodology
Nishan, you're breaking. Yeah, broke up a little bit.
Often there are budget proposals that actually don't consult the groups that they are supposed to assist or help in how they're implemented. So I think estate communities is a great example where often the community itself may be bypassed in the way that money is spent in support of the community. And I think it is a great example that Kamathi brought on why there needs to be more consultation. It doesn't have to be a survey. Because there are many other structures in government that actually connect with the estate community. But it must be a meaningful engagement. It can't simply be a big public event that says we consulted the estate community. So the idea is that the community itself has contributed in a way that inform the decision-making process on how the money is spent. And that is what is of interest ultimately in a budget process. Yeah.
Thank you, Nishan. We have I'll read out another question from Harshina from Lanka Deepa, who says countries like Sri Lanka where lawmakers try to hide numbers, information, even we see both this and the previous governments tried not to give information even through RTI requests. What is your take on this?
So transparency and accountability is also it's something that it's basically the better transparency that you have, the more difficult it is to subvert the numbers and to shift the analysis. So I think one thing that is important that we all push for is for more open data. On many aspects, and you can see that as soon as you start to see ministries and departments publishing their data on a more regular basis, data that, as Lahiru said in the presentation, data also has to be comparable across different reports. There has to be consistent over time. The more we see the ministry, institutions, and departments publishing this kind of data over time, then you have a much broader scope for analysis and for independent assessment and critique of this data as well. That makes it much more difficult for individuals who have greater access to say limited data release. It makes it much more difficult for such individuals to have power over that analysis and the outputs from that data. So really what we as a society need to push for is more open data across the board. Because a lot of this data is collected and generated using public funds, and therefore there is a very good case to be made for more open data from across all government ministries and departments.
Thank you, Teshal. Do we have any other questions directly related to our findings as well as recommendations? Okay, so before we move on, actually, feel free to continue to ask your questions afterwards as well. If you would like to directly reach out to our team or Deshal or Lahiri, we're happy to sort of take your questions afterwards as well. Before we wrap up, and I just wanted to give everybody a preview of something new that we are working on, which is related to the topic of public finance. I am just going to project my screen here. Yes, I hope everyone can see this. Asanka, is it visible?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we're happy to give you the first look actually of this new platform that we're developing called publicfinance.lk. This is not live yet. We're hoping to make this live by Monday, but we just wanted to give everybody a preview of what this is going to look like. Once we are fully developed this platform, it's going to be a one-stop shop for public finance related information in Sri Lanka. As you can see, this beta version features insights and analysis from Verite Research on key topics within public finance like debt, expenditure, financing, as well as revenue. The aim of this platform is to actually enhance the public's understanding of public finance by making information easily accessible and digestible. So we hope you will explore this blog once it is live and that you will actually find it useful in your reporting. Insights and analysis of this blog will also be available through social media starting from next week. So we will send you the link to this blog. It's going to be called publicfinance.lk and it will be live by Monday. So we hope you will find this information and our insights useful for your reporting as well. If there are no other further questions related to the presentation, I would just like to say thank you for joining us today. If this is the first time we're actually doing a press briefing virtually. We've seen a lot of familiar names here who have joined us before in our physical press briefing. So if there is any feedback that you would like to give us to improve this experience, do let us know. And like I mentioned before, we will be sharing a folder with everybody that will be a press pack, including the press release from today, including the press release in both Sinhala and English. We will have the country summary for Sri Lanka from the Open Budget Survey. And we will also have several infographics with the key findings and the key recommendations that you will be able to use to support your reporting. So if there are any further questions regarding the presentation, I would like to thank you all again for being here today, and we hope to engage with you more in the future. And feel free, as always, to reach out to me after if you need any other material or if you have any questions about our research.
Thank you.